Welcome to Saturday Sofa Sessions. Today, the zombie and shifting, forward, reverse, what have you. So I want to start off by saying that when it comes to EV conversions, not all transmissions were created equal. So to keep things simple, we're going to cover a couple examples, but we have to set some boundaries. We can't possibly cover every single scenario. So I'll give you an example using the Lexus GS450H transmission, which is in my truck, and I'll also give you an example using the third-gen Prius transaxle. Basically, what you will find out when it comes to electric conversions is that these electric transmissions, if you will, sometimes I call them transmotors, they don't have a reverse gear. I'm not going to play a game of semantics, but I will choose my words carefully so that we can explain this. Basically, I'm not saying that you can't go in reverse or back up your car. Of course you can. What I'm saying that if we were to open a transaxle, we would not find a reverse gear like we would in a regular transmission. So if we take a Prius transaxle and there is no reverse gear, how do we go backwards? Well, this is where the zombie comes in. The zombie supports two signals, a forward signal and a reverse signal. What we have to do is we have to tell the motor to spin backwards in order to go in reverse. Now you may say, wait, I have a Prius, there's a shifter. It has an R on it for reverse. I put it into that R and aren't I using a reverse gear? No, you're actually telling the motor to spin backwards. There are some exceptions to the rule, and I always refer to the Lexus GS450H transmission as a unicorn. First of all, that is a rear-wheel drive transmission, so it's what I would call a regular automatic transmission that just happens to have two electric motors in it. That transmission does have a reverse gear, and it actually has a floor shifter. This isn't it. This is just for clickbait. I don't know what this came out of. I'm thinking about putting this in my truck because I don't like the current aftermarket shifter that's in my truck. This will eventually operate my Lexus GS450H. That one is manually shifted. There's actual linkage on that transmission, and we will shift it from park to drive to reverse and to neutral. And maybe using the word shifting is a misnomer. It's more like putting it in gear, because when we think about shifting, we're shifting from first to second to third to fourth. So what we're doing is we're putting it in drive or putting it in reverse. Okay, so let me take this off the table and focus more on the zombie and explain to you how all this will work. Okay, so let's talk about the ZombieVerter VCU, vehicle control unit, and what role it plays when it comes to forward, reverse, and putting the transmission in gear, if you will. So this vehicle control unit has input and output, and one of the inputs that we will learn about, and it's kind of obvious, is your throttle pedal. So it uses an electronic Hall effect throttle pedal, and that's our way as humans using our foot to step on it, press it down, communicate to the VCU that we want to go, okay? But the VCU will not just spin the motor when you press on the throttle pedal. It actually acts as a traffic cop, okay? And what it does, and this is for safety and also for other reasons, your safety and the safety of electronics, if you will, so things don't get ruined, damaged. When you step on the throttle, the VCU, and I don't know if this is the exact logical sequence, probably not, but I'm just walking you through it. You tell the brain, go, move the car, I want to drive. And the VCU says, hold on a second, buddy, are we in gear? And then it checks if we're in forward or reverse. Now, it doesn't care if you're in forward and reverse, it's going to spin the motor, right? If you're going to back up into the trash can because you're in reverse instead of forward, so be it. But it's going to allow it to spin the motor. The forward and reverse spin the motor in opposite directions, but it's not necessarily associated and directly linked to, say, clockwise and anti-clockwise. As Damien explains to us, it's relative. It can be reversed and changed, swapped, if you will, in the software for the VCU. So there are some conversions where people will take maybe a Tesla small rear drive unit and put it in the front of the car, and it gets kind of twisted around. So now reverse is forward and forward is reverse. Well, you can, in the software, and I'm not telling you this controls a Tesla motor, not yet, but you can swap it. If you take another type of drivetrain, like maybe Mitsubishi Outlander is a better example. Let's say you take the front motor and you put it in the rear of the car, or you take its rear motor and you put it in the front of the car, and again, things get twisted. And now when you step on a throttle and you think you're going to go forward, it wants to go backwards. You can swap those settings. You can reverse them inside the software, and I will show you how to do that. So in this video, we are introducing two new pins, two additional pins, pin 53 and pin 54. Pin 53 is a reverse signal, pin 54 is a forward signal, and you give it one or the other. Now, there is a scenario where you don't need to use any of them, okay? There are cases where the shifters that are in the car, the OEM shifters, are intelligent enough to not need these signals because they will communicate with the zombie using CAN bus, which is what we've learned about when we talk to the BMW safety box. But those are kind of on an island. They're kind of an exception to the rule. So that brings us back to these two signals. We could only rely on one pin. For example, what we can do, we can tell the VCU that our default direction is forward. So we get in the car, we turn the ignition to on, further turn it to start. We end up being in run mode, and once in run mode, by default, the VCU says, this guy wants to drive, we're moving forward. The default direction is forward. Okay, great. Now what? There is no signal, which is, by the way, 12-volt signal. There is no signal coming in on pin 54 to tell it to go forward because the default is set to forward. Now, I might be going a little bit quickly over this, but don't worry. When we add the pins, there will be a demo or two at the end of the video. We'll put the laptop out here. We'll get it all set up. There is no wire on pin 54. The default set is to forward. How do we go backwards? Well, we can use a button. We can put a one-wire button on pin 53, which is reverse. And when we want to go in reverse, we push a button, let's say, on the dash, and now we are going in reverse. The VCU will simply make the motor spin backwards. And this is where we get into positive and negative torque, if you want to geek out. So positive torque is just spinning the motor one way. I'm not going to say necessarily forward because it's kind of relative maybe, but it's one way. And then when we say reverse, it sends negative torque signal or makes a negative torque request and spins the motor the opposite way. So that's an example of a button. Inside the software, there is a really nice utility with a pull down where we can pick our choices. We can say default mode is forward, or we can say we are going to use a single button to tell the VCU when we're going to reverse, or we can say we're going to use a switch. Now, the difference between a button and a switch is that the button is really on or off, whereas a switch, and I'll show you one, is forward or reverse, and then the middle position is essentially neutral. So when we use a forward and reverse switch, we do use both pins, pin 53 and 54, and we will demo that as well. And I'll show you how I plan on shifting or putting the Rabbit into forward and reverse. So I just want to say that when I thought about making these videos, which I am really enjoying, by the way, and I want to apologize about the delay with the Rabbit. I sort of did the Ed thing from Latuda, I don't know how to pronounce that correctly, where he went on a sidetrack of doing some EV videos. And yes, the Rabbit is getting done. There's a couple reasons why I'm doing this. One is I painted the floors of the Rabbit, and we had some humidity and rain, and I'm still literally waiting on the paint to dry. So I'm finding things to do. I also enjoy doing these videos because it forces me to learn myself. And I wanted to say solidify my knowledge, but there's really nothing to solidify. I'm a total noob. And I think it's really important to share things from the noob's perspective, because we tend to forget and we tend to take things for granted once we develop some sort of a level of competence or mastery of something. So that's why I'm making these videos, and I hope you find them beneficial. But the point is, I want to make these videos in such a way to show you everything you can do with just the Zombie. Okay, your laptop not included, your bench power supply, not really being a limiting factor here. But what I'm trying to say is that if you just buy the Zombie, there's stuff you can do without even owning an inverter, without even owning a motor, without even owning a potential donor car for your EV conversion, right? As you see here, I always do things very simply. So this is the star of our show, and these are just tools, right? Okay, so just with the Zombie, the video series is going to continue to where you don't need other things. I mean, today we'll just introduce a little switch, but there is, again, no inverter, no transmission, no motor, no big battery pack, right? And there's still things you can do. You can still play around with the software. If you're on the fence about getting a Zombie, pull the trigger, get it. Take a few weeks or weekends to solder everything on there. It does take a while. Those of you whose Zombies are sitting collecting dust on the shelf or the closet, feel zero guilt. That's standard operating procedure. These are like the goldfish, they're the same species. They have to sit there, collect dust for a couple months to acclimate to their new surroundings, and then you can use them guilt free. So if you already own one and you haven't tried it, tested it, look at this knucklehead. If I can do it, you can do it. Bust it out, start playing with it, okay? So something that I like to do in every video is make sure that it can stand on its own. And although I refer to other videos that I've made, if you want to get more information, I would like for you to watch any video independently and be able to follow along and accomplish whatever we set out to accomplish in it. Now, if you've been following the series, you know that we've built up to quite a few wires going to the VCU, and I want to take a step back and review exactly what is needed. And if you may feel a little bit lost, hopefully they will put you back on the path. So the VCU is an electronic component. An electronic component needs power. We're talking about DC, direct current, so it runs on batteries essentially. It simply needs two wires, a black one and a red one, a positive and a negative. So we're going to start off here with just the regular black wire. And this black wire, I've just crimped on the ends, the same pins that go on here. We will again continue without a proper connector, although we own one. Just to make things easy and simple, I'm going to demonstrate without it. So the negative lead from this end simply goes on pin 55. So this is 1 through 28, 29 through 56, and the last one on here, 56, is positive. So it will get a red wire. The black wire is that's it. It's just a wire. It could be 1 foot long. It could be 10 feet long. It doesn't matter. No fuse on it, no switch on it. If you like to put a switch on there for the permanent power for this pin, you don't really need one. And if you want to fuse both sides or fuse the negative side instead of positive, we can argue about that all day. If you like the belt and suspenders solution, as I call it, then put a fuse on both wires to make yourself feel better. If you want to school me in the comments, by all means, please do. I'm always open to learn and to be corrected. The red wire here has a fuse on it. This we've switched to these inline fuses. I like these little guys, a little bit cleaner. And this is also 1 amp. Usually for this we can use 1 amp, 2 amp, maybe a 3 amp. If all you have is 5 amps, that's still better than nothing. But it's just going to be these two wires. The red goes on pin 56. So our wires go on pin 55 and 56, like so. The other ends would run to our battery power supply. Our battery power supply used to have these alligator clips. This is standard issue. You know, you would plug in your leads, if you will, into these studs or ports or holes, whatever, and then these things would get clipped onto our wires. But what we've discovered is that we can get rid of these leads and these alligator clips and make things a little bit less cluttered. We get rid of that stuff, and then we can simply put ring terminals on here, and we can put them on these studs that happen to caps that happen to unscrew. So here I'm doing it left-handed on camera. Alrighty. So this is just a little bit nicer setup. There are reasons why sometimes you may want to use an alligator clip. When shit happens, you can just unclip it. But in our case, we can just yank these out, you know, if we see black smoke coming out. So although that part is more permanent there, it's still easy to disconnect if we have to. Since we don't have a switch on here, of course there is a power switch on there, but I've had a case where I got a brand new unit and the power button would turn it on but never turn it off. So I had to literally unplug it to turn it off. Okay, let me plug the back of this thing in. The back of these bench power supplies uses a standard PC, personal computer cable. I don't know if these have any type of special name. I don't know if we just call them AC cables or what. All right, but we just plug it in back here like so. And then the other end obviously just goes into a power strip. Notice I held off on connecting our red wire to the bench power supply. I like to turn it on first and see what voltage it wants to send. And I don't know why that is set to 0. I must have flipped these when carrying it here from the garage, but that was interesting. Okay, so I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to turn it off. So did I jinx it or did I break my power supply? There it is. These cheaper ones will do that. They take a while to drain. All right. So this is unscripted, obviously, and I'm showing you everything here. So we will screw these leads on, only 2 wires. And it's a good idea to not screw on the lid, because with the lid on we can't really see any of the action in here, which is just blinking LEDs, but that's what we want. It's better than nothing. And now we turn it on, and we get 2 lights on the green board, the zombie board, and there's 1 light that will flicker on the blue card, which is the Wi-Fi card. That's it, guys. 2 wires, and we can talk to this thing using a laptop, okay? That's how simple it is. I know this looks very spaghetti-ish, but it's just two wires right there with a fuse on it. With a bench power supply, you don't even need to use a fuse if you know how to. Did I muck it up? Oh, great. Oh, so this is, I'm just leaving all the comedy in here. This wire is underneath the pin right now. I accidentally yanked it out. Drain, okay. Again, we don't want to mess with any wires while it's on, at least not without a good header. So this is back on. I'm leaving that in the video. It's just part of troubleshooting. You might see stuff like that happen where your pin was underneath the pin. The female pin went underneath the male pin rather than on it. So it looked like it was connected but wasn't. But hey, I meant to do that, by the way. What a perfect example to validate, to keep the lid on for testing so you can see those lights. Okay guys, so we haven't done anything with the two new pins we talked about, pin 53, pin 54, for some magical switch that we're supposed to add. Nothing. We're just going to focus on the software first. So with the Zombie on, it's advertising its network. It's also going to issue an IP address to my laptop. There's two ways to connect to it. We can put this on our home network, but I am keeping it simple right now. And although that may be in the long run the better solution, right now I just want an isolated ecosystem. So this laptop is joining this network rather than it jumping on my home wireless network. And first thing I like to do is just to see that we can see that network. So here it is, Ferry Link asking us to disconnect, which means it's connected. No internet, that's fine. This is a private little network. All we want to do is talk to it. We open up a web browser, go to 192.168.4.1. We have to access it by IP address. We get to that, and we are on the Johannes Hubner Open Inverter software. Essentially the menu system, web-based menu system for the ZombieVerter, and we want to go into parameters, pronounce settings. Okay, so we want to look at some settings, see if we can see anything in here that talks about gears, shifting, transmission, so on. Okay, well, under general setup, straight away we can see there's a transmission option, and this thing says auto and manual. And well, I have a Prius, so I called it an auto. I'm going to try to explain a couple different scenarios. So there's something here called gear lever, and so it's none or BMW F30. One thing that is want to mention is that Mr. Damien McGuire, it's no secret, is a fan of the Fords. Okay, he loves his Fords. Joking, BMWs. He's a BMW man, right? And so a lot of this stuff is biased. So, and that's a good thing. I mean, I'd rather have 10 different BMW models in here than none. So he has a lot of stuff kind of configured, predefined. Those are his test mules. Those are his test cars. But I'm pointing that out because if you go to evbmw.com and go to the web shop, that's his store for the ZombieVerter. But in no way is ZombieVerter only restricted to BMWs. So his website is called EVBMW because he's just a BMW fan, a buff. But the ZombieVerter, the beauty of it is that it supports a whole bunch of different vehicles. Anyway, let's continue and land the plane. So we have gearbox control. That is really pertaining, I think, to the Lexus GS458. Under throttle, there is a parameter called direction mode. And here we have a few choices. This is what I was talking about. We can have a button, we can have a switch, and then we can reverse the button, we can reverse the switch, and there's an option here that says default forward. So we can start, let's say, with default forward. If we put it onto default forward, then the way this works, anytime you make a change, you want to say save parameters to flash. And the results are shown under parameters, messages, and it says that the can map stored, so it got written. Okay, great. Let's go to the spot values. And under spot values, we're looking for a parameter called dir for direction. And I feel silly telling you this because I knew they weren't alphabetical, but I thought when certain values change, those parameters go to the top, and they don't. And so I couldn't find this guy. I couldn't find direction. It's kind of here on its own. And if you scroll down further, there's actually a section with a bunch of D's in it, like the din, 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 din. But the dir wasn't amongst those. So I'm just letting you know that you kind of have to scroll through all of them. Maybe it would be cool if these columns were sortable. Or you could actually, it would be really nice if you could say like hidden, if you could hide the ones you didn't want to clutter the screen, especially for noobs. Okay, so right now our direction is neutral, okay? Our direction is neutral because our operation mode is off. Okay, but I wanted to show you that dir mode, I think that's what it was called, is where we pick how we're going to control our signal here. All right, so we are going to start off in the default mode, and then I'm just going to show you how to just use one wire on either pin, and that's all you're doing is just sending it 12 volts and how it changes its behavior. One thing we have to do though is we have to add more wires here to put the zombie into on mode and then put it into run mode for us to see the behavior of the shifter, if you will, of the direction feature. So let's do that. So with the power turned off, we're going to review that. To give it ignition, we have an ignition switch here. This simulates turning the key to on, and this is just an on-off little switch. And it has a little fuse on here, and I've also decided to use a ring terminal on it. Again, it just makes it that much cleaner, not using alligator clips. So we're going to put that on there. And anybody remember which pin ignition goes on? It sits on pin 15, and the pins on the top here, and I get them into view. Wow, this 1 through 14, 15 through 28. All right, so that is added, and we'll turn it off. And then we have to add the third red wire, what I started calling the Trinity, Holy Trinity. This one goes on pin 52. So 56, 55, 54, 3, 2. It has a momentary button that you just press. This is simulating you putting the key onto the start position to start the engine with the starter, and then it springs back. And also we're going to use a ring terminal on this end here. All right, and this is putting us, this will allow us to enter essentially on mode and run mode. All right, that should be good enough. So let's power it on. Again, still no directional signals on pin 53 or 54. We're still just playing with the software here. I'm going to put it in auto mode, and when you click the auto auto for refresh, you have to click refresh once, and then under here, spot values, you'll see a little donut spinning. Okay, so now we're watching this operational mode right here. We are going to first turn on the ignition with this switch. This is on and off, so on. Nothing will change here. And we're just going to skip down to direction. And direction is neutral. Now we're going to press the momentary button, and our op mode should go to run. And we are in run. Let's see what happened to our direction. Look at that. Our direction is drive. But we don't have anything on pin 54. We're not giving it 12 volts. Why is that thing on drive? And then there's nothing on pin 53, but we don't care because that would say reverse. Well, let's go back up to our parameters. And under parameters, it was under throttle. Our directional mode, our default is forward. That's why as soon as we enter run mode, the VCU says, okay, you're going forward. Let's turn off the ignition. We're not going to be doing any programming changes with the ignition on, obviously. So we turn off the ignition. Let's go ahead and change our DIR mode to a different option. Default forward, we're going to put it to a button, okay? So now it's set to a button, and we got to make sure that we write this. So save parameters to flash, which is basically write them to memory. Okay, now let's jump back to spot values. We're going to turn on our ignition. Let's just scroll down to see what our direction. So now we are in neutral. We're back into run. Direction is neutral. Okay, so we are now on the button, right? Let's turn this off. And we are going to add a wire to the forward pin to simulate a button. Okay, so here I'm going to just add this blue wire and use it for pin 54, which I believe is the forward direction. I'm just using this makeshift thing to make sure we have a fuse on it as well. This is just a 1 amp fuse, just so I don't have it directly connected to that pin. But that's all that is. Okay, so I'm going to put this on pin 54. Okay, and I have to borrow an alligator clip for this, so this is going to be pretending that this is like our switch. I'm just going to be making this connection on the blue wire. All right, so right now we are back to our interface. Yep, we're up mode is off. Perfect. Our direction right now should be neutral, and it's neutral. So we will turn on the ignition, and then we press the button, and this should put us in run mode. Of course, I always keep forgetting the auto refresh. Okay, we're in run mode. Direction is neutral, but now watch what happens when we give the signal of forward. Did you guys see that? The direction right here switch to drive. So that's a button. So we just switch that to drive. What I'm going to do is do another test. So let's turn this off. I wasn't thinking of using the button in this way. I think the button to me would have been where we're always going forward and then we tell it we want to go in reverse. So let's try that trick. So I'm going to get rid of the blue wire, which I'm associating with forward, and I'm going to bring out a green wire. This is kind of silly that I'm switching colors, but this is just so that my brain can function. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to add a green wire for the reverse signal on pin 53. And put it on a fuse. Okay, we're going to reprogram it real quick to default of forward. So under throttle, direction is going to be direction mode. We're going to tell it that is default forward. And the idea being that when we push the button, we want to go in reverse. So we'll think of it that way. So let's say save parameters. And let's put it to auto and refresh and jump to spot values. We are in off mode, that's correct, and we want to check our direction. Our direction is neutral. Okay, so we turn the ignition key to on and we start the car. We are in drive. Okay, things make sense. Now we're going to push the reverse button. That's what this is simulating. We push the reverse and we're in reverse. So far so good. Okay, now we want to go forward again. So because we just have a button and the default is forward, let's see what happens when we remove a reverse signal. Okay, that makes sense. We go to drive. I'm following, and now let's turn this off and we're in neutral. Okay, this makes sense. All right, so that was an example of using a button. We're going to call it, that was an example of using a reverse button. Our default direction was forward, and we were only using the button to go in reverse. And when we turned off the reverse button, it just put us in the default of forward. Okay guys, I know we're making a long video. I hope some of you are still with us here. We finally reached the meat and potatoes of the video, and this is going to be where we're adding the forward and reverse switch. This is how I am going to operate the Rabbit. So this is a pretty simple switch: forward, neutral, and reverse. Now some of them will actually say neutral in the middle, mine doesn't, but I would still call this technically a 3-position switch. I don't know if it's really a 2-position, but unlike an on and off, you know, we have forward, nothing, and reverse. Okay, so let's wire up this switch real quick and then set up the software for a switch, not a button, and do a quick demo and then go have a beer. All right, so I have here just a female blade terminal, and that goes in the middle. This brings 12 volts to our switch, and it is coming just from the power supply. We are going to use a bench power supply for that with an alligator clip, And let's see if I can somehow add a fuse to this. And not fry anything. Okay. And then something I noticed on this switch, and hopefully I don't look foolish, but it's kind of backwards. See how the top here says forward? Well, that's not the top pin. The forward is actually the opposite. So if your forward's on top, you want the blade on the bottom. It's some sort of a teeter-totter thing, I'm sure. And then reverse. So reverse is a green wire. So reverse button is on the bottom here, on the bottom, but it goes to the top blade. Check your wiring schematic. A lot of times they're the same, so it will be exactly what I'm showing you. Okay, and then the other ends from the button just run to our zombie. The blue is forward, goes to pin 54, and the green is reverse and goes to pin 53. So now we are using both of these pins. And this is just, I'm choosing to do it this way, okay? I could use a button, I could set the default direction to forward, yada yada. This is what I'm choosing to do. So let's just give our zombie power, and we're going to jump to the web interface, and we're going to configure it for a switch this time. And first thing we want to do is go to parameters, and then we're going to head to the throttle section. So Damien is still working on his interface, and he's breaking things down and into more meaningful subgroups. I'm not sure why directional mode is under here. To me, it would maybe make more sense under general than under throttle, but I'm sure he has his reasons. And so dir mode, directional mode, we're going to change to a switch. Now there's an option here that says switch reversed, and that would mean like if you took a motor that was in the electric car, the OEM electric car, in the back, it drove the back wheels, but for some reason you're going to put it in the front of your car and has to be twisted opposite direction to fit and work. Well, now it's going to spin in opposite direction. So you would go in here and you would say switch reversed. Okay, does that make sense? That might be kind of outside the scope of what we're doing, or maybe it's within the scope. So that's what those options mean. And button reversed would mean the same thing. That when you push the button, it kind of, the motor spins the opposite way of what the default would have been. So we want it to be on switched or switch. We're using a switch instead of a button, and we're going to go here and say save parameters. And I wish this part would automatically drop you to parameters where it says can map stored, or at least flash this message up there so we can easily see it. It doesn't, but so be it. Okay, now we go to spot values. Now we will enable auto refresh, and remember to click this refresh button so that it gives us the spinning donut. And here we go. So op mode is off. Let's check our direction. Our direction is neutral. Okay, we don't have to watch the operational mode because we can just trust that as I flip these buttons. We've seen it a million times. So ignition switch on. There is no change of any kind in the interface. Now we will press the start, and I'm just going to scroll up there to prove to you that we are in run mode. So I use start and run interchangeably. I'm trying to maybe condition myself to say run instead of start. So we are in run mode, but no change to our direction, right? We're still up here in neutral. All right, well, why is that? Well, because our switch is in neutral position. So I'm sitting there in my garage and I want to back out of the garage. So I'm going to click on reverse. Look at that. It switched to reverse. Okay, so now I'm going to put it in neutral, and that direction switched to neutral. And now I'm going to put it in forward, and I keep calling it forward, but it's drive. I wonder if we can get this switch that actually says drive rather than forward so that our nomenclature will match. And then back to neutral. That is really cool. I dig that. Um, Now let's see one thing. What happens when I leave it in forward and I'm lazy and I will just shut off my ignition now. So it puts it in neutral when I shut it off, even though my switch is set to forward. But I guess there's some internals that get disconnected, so on. Let's see what happens when we turn the vehicle back on, and if it will automatically go to drive since we are in the forward position. Yep, it did that. As soon as we said started the vehicle, it went to drive. Whew, well, that was a long video. Let me turn everything off. Hopefully it made sense. I'll do my best to edit it to make it make sense as much as I can. Um, I hope you enjoyed the extra company today. Sometimes 4 heads are better than one. Thanks for watching.